pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. Astrid was 14 when she first left Norway, and she traveled across to the United States. She just had an inkling and thought that would be really fun. And she had to claim where she was going to go, how much money she had on her, and the address of the person she was visiting. This would be the first of many visits she took back and forth and back and forth. She ended up back in Norway, married her husband. They had a little girl. And, they came back here and had a little girl, deciding that, maybe Minneapolis is where they want to live. And that maybe that's what they should be doing. Life is never as we think. His family farm was in trouble. His parents could no longer take care of it. So what did they do? Back to Norway. And because life throws us curveballs, after a few years or so, he was killed in a car accident. By that point in time, her family was already here. So what did she do? She, a single mother with 3 young children under the age of 12, got back on the boat, as they refer to it, and sailed back to New York, which, as you might know, was only half the trip, because then she had to make the way on the train to get to Minneapolis, where her family was. And she raised the family. Her children told the story of being on the train, coming to Minnesota, and Astrid got off the train to go find some food. These 3 children had never been here. Well, the oldest was a baby, and they did not speak English. So they worried until they saw her get back on the train. So they lived here. She was not a skilled person. She ended up having throat cancer. So on top of having the language barriers, she simply had some communication issues because she spoke with a whisper. But she went on to buy herself a home in North Minneapolis, at that time on Floyd B. Olson Memorial Highway. A lot of the Norwegians were there. And she made a good life for herself. She was always someone who believed in being involved. So she was very active in politics. She was a housekeeper and a maid in hospitals and such, and she always was involved with the unions because she thought that was very valuable. The thing that she taught her family was that homeland is important, new country is important. And one of the things she did as a little older in life was to start the Nordby Lodge with 2 gentlemen. And she did spend a lot of her time with gentlemen. A lot of the pictures of the unions and such. That's Astrid. Tenacity and Grace. And she came through it remarkably. Lucille was 14 when she finished her formal education. Her one-room schoolhouse went K-8, and at that point in time, the job of the women, the girls, was to either work on the farm or skilled labor. So she became a maid and a nanny for some of the wealthier families in Marine on St. Croix. She went to the Withrow ballroom for fun on Saturday nights, as you do. And she met her husband, 14 years her senior, and they lived on the farm in a log cabin. Now, what you may or may not know about the Swedes is that when they came here and homesteaded, they would build log cabins. Many of them still exist. This is a current photograph with siding and electricity and everything. They did not have siding, they did not have electricity, they did not have running water. Well, that's sick, right? But they lived there for 6 years. Her husband farmed, and they had a baby. They farmed a little bit more, and at one point, Lucille had had enough. She put her foot down. She gave her husband an ultimatum, and she said, "We will get you have electricity and one more room, or I'm going into town." So he took care of that. And they moved into town moved across the street to a house that had, things like plumbing and electricity. And then they decided, okay, we're going to build on our farm, we'll build a house. It'll be great. Which meant she lived in that log cabin with no electricity or water for another 3 years while that house was built. If that's not love, I'm not sure what is. She lost her husband quite early in life. She was 14 years his junior. And at that point, she had other people farming the land, as they do up in Hugo. And so she had that taken care of and decided, I've been tied to the farm my whole life. I've been working since I was 14. And so she started traveling. Looks like battery. So, Lucille spent her senior years traveling. Of course, she went to her home in Sweden, and she loved life, and she got involved, and she did all the things that Swedish Lutherans up in Chisago City do. Lucille lived to 102. Yeah. All right. Mary Lou was 14 when her brothers were off in World War II. And she was spending her time writing letters to them. She is one of those who was a teacher from the word go. And when she graduated from high school, the way the rules worked was if you had a semester of community college, you could teach. She did that, and she was a teacher in the K-8 school down the road. And it ended up that she was a learner and a teacher her whole life. Mary Lou went on to get married, and she had 5 children. They lived in a couple of different places around the country, but they ended up in Nebraska. Her husband died very young, while 3 of her children were still at home. 2 were off in college. And through her whole life, from graduating from college, into her 80s, she was a teacher. She became a reading specialist. Wherever they lived, wherever they traveled to, she was teaching. And that's just what she did. And after 30 years, she got her master's. And those are 3 of the 5 kids. But Mary Lou's story is good. But after she retired, it's awesome. Because she decided that volunteering with the Red Cross and the critical response team was the thing that she needed to do next. For 20 years, she had her bag packed and everything ready so that when there was a flood, as in Cedar Rapids, when there was a tornado, when there was whatever, she could be in her car within 4 hours' notice. She received that call on September 10th. And spent 3 weeks in New York at Ground Zero taking care of the kids. Everywhere she went, she took care of the kids. So as the parents were on this Red Cross ship, getting what they needed, getting their supplies, etc., she was on the pier with the kids, doing the reading specialist role. Pretty cool. One of those people who just energize your buddy, right? She lived her life with tenacity and grace. Her last volunteer experience, the 9/11 happened when she was 70. And you can maybe see in the picture. Her last was at age 87. She volunteered for tornado response team. So I've now told you the story of 3 women, and yes, I changed the names of 2 of them. Because as I was thinking about Astrid and her story, she happens to be my grandmother, these other 2 women were rolling around, and I feel the need to tell their story as well, because it's very cool. So I've told you the story of an immigrant, told you the story of a farmer, and I've told you the story of an educator, a teacher. So now what I encourage you to do is think about some questions. So which of these stories resonated with you, and where you are in your life right now? We're all thrown curveballs, right? These 3 women were thrown some nasty curveballs, and they did very well in their lives. So when life throws you a curve, how do you respond? What's the line? Isn't it life is 10% circumstance and 90% what you make of it, right? And since all stats are made up, I'm just going to say that's what it is. But they all had their issues, and they all came through very well. And then third, and this might be the most important thing I hope you think about, what are the stories of the people in your life? And what are you thinking about in terms of an uncle, an aunt, a cousin? Think, gosh, I should really look at their story. I should really see what they're about. I hope this encourages you to do that. I didn't know all the stories of Lucille and Mary Lou, and all I had to do was say, tell me about her. And it was wonderful. So, thank you for listening, and I hope you got something out of this.